Good afternoon. This is a talk on marketing. I have one note before we start, that if you are scheduled for a VR demo, please make sure to arrive on time, otherwise you're going to lose your slot. And if you aren't a VR demo, good for you, because it's actually really cool. So first, I'm going to talk from, just kind of the format of this is I'm going to talk for a minute, set this up, introduce our guests, and then hopefully they're going to talk a bunch and I'm not going to talk at all. We'll see how that goes. I know you'll talk a lot. You'll save me. So hi, I'm Chet Faliszek from Valve. So thank you for attending our panel. The game world is getting crowded, and just like you need to be able to make a good game, you need to market your game as well. And at its essence, marketing is just letting players know about your game and telling them what they're buying. It's that simple. But there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and so that's why we wanted to do this in a panel format, so that we can get a lot of different approaches and a lot of different thoughts on it. For Left 4 Dead 1, Left 4 Dead 2, Portal 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I help with the marketing on those. And when we were going into a retail release, we saw large marketing budgets. We did things like television spots, billboards, buying end caps. There's even things like shelf stocking fees, where there's a lot involved. Times are changing. And so when we came to CSGO, we approached that in a different way, because it's a different kind of game, and it's a different way to approach it. Now to get kind of who we have up here talking, let me introduce our panelists. First up is Alexander Bruce. He's a creator of Antichamber. So even before the thought of this panel existed, I had noticed Alexander's blog post on Game Sutra and his thoughts on marketing. He had some interesting ideas. And so, the success of his one-man game Antichamber isn't an accident. And we're going to find out today some of what he did for that. Next up is Alfonso Cubias, Jr. So he joins us from Digital Extreme with their latest game, Warframe. They're jumping deep into how do you market a game, just not at the release of your game, but as a service. So their game, Warframe, is a free-to-play game. You can check it out on Steam. Cliff Harris is the man behind Positech. Cliff used to be introduced by where he used to work, but now he has so many games to his credit, we just have to call him Cliff from Positech. He's done the Democracy series, Gratuitous Space Battles, Gratuitous Tank Battles, Red Shirt, and many other games. Cliff also is known to write a blog post or two about marketing on his website. And his website has something pretty awesome more game websites should have, and it's a page dedicated to his cats. I appreciate that. And lastly, the hardest to pronounce for me, Henrique. Olifiers? And we'll go with that. He joins us from Bossa Studios. They created the Wacky Surgeon Simulator 2013, among other games. And Surgeon Simulator was interesting of how do you take a game jam idea into a release product and what they did for that. So all four of our guests have taken different approaches to marketing their games. But one thing I've heard from more than a few of them, and that's start marketing early. So Alexander, that was what one of your blog posts was about. So what does that mean to you? When should you start marketing your game?
I think that depends a bit on your game, but it also depends on what you're thinking about in terms of marketing. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything you have to talk about your game, you just start blasting it out to press, early, sending press releases out early. Marketing your game early may just mean going to some small local events and talking to the people around there to see how interesting it is to them, and if they start becoming interested in it, start setting up your game in other locations and see if you can just start getting random people to play it. And if it starts catching random people, maybe go a bit bigger, see if there's some kind of bigger festival that you can go to. And the reason that you're doing that is because it's allowing you to try things out in a whole lot of different ways and fail many, many times, because a lot of the times the people who have spent several years trying to market a game, you're generally only looking at the tail end, of that. A whole lot of people who would have found out about Antichamber would have been finding out about it shortly before it was released. And by that stage, I was fairly good at talking about it, only because I'd spent 3 years messing up that process and just trying and failing enough times, And the reason that you're doing that, saying that you should experiment and try and fail, is because you're going to get a lot of people who will work on their game, in their studio, and they'll just keep it to themselves, and then they'll get around to the release and think, oh, we need to get people to know about this thing. Let's start marketing it. And so they'll look at some of the people who are successful and what they did with marketing and try and just follow that. And chances are their first marketing efforts, which are going to be the ones that go out just before their game is released, aren't going to be very good. One of the things that I say to a lot of people is that if you think about the first time that you tried drawing something or the first time that you tried programming something, it wasn't very good because you didn't really know what you were doing, and only through doing it a lot and trying and failing a lot of times did you actually get good at that. And I think that marketing is just another skill like those.
Totally agree, but there's something that has a background on that is the difference between awareness and conversion, which is very special, and that's one of the reasons why you have to start very early on. If you have a game that goes on Steam on the top spot and nobody heard of it before, is a great spot to be, but chances are you'll not convert that into a sale, whereas if you have seen that game a couple of times and heard about it and you have read it somewhere else, the minute that you have the chance in the spotlight, then is where you convert into sales. This is why you have to start very early on. You've got to have people just heard about your game and build this awareness for the time you launch and you plan everything, ramp everything up to be big. It's just a matter of converting that exposure into sales and not actually making people understand what your game is all about.
Well, I also think that some people also think, oh, now that my game is up on this banner, this is when I need to start talking about it. And I'm of the view that people are most excited about something that they can't have. You know, they can't just go off and play it right now. So they're going to be talking about what it could be. They're going to be very speculative. And so that's where you're getting a lot of that, chatter going around. And the more of that you can generate yourself before the thing releases, that's how you then get this big thing that finally releases. And then all of these people are talking about. And then you start getting that, word of mouth going out. If you've released your game and no one has heard about it before, and therefore it wasn't a successful thing, the fact that no one's talking about it means it's going to be even harder to get people to talk about it, because they're going to look at your game, they're going to be like, I've never heard of this thing and it was released last week, so I'm also not going to write about it. This isn't exciting, this isn't going to get me hits on my webpage.
Yeah, and the word of mouth, there's another element to it which is very special. Is that you don't want to talk about something that everybody else is talking about, especially if you are an opinion maker. You want to talk about something that people didn't hear about. So the earlier you start talking about your game, the more chances you have that someone else important or the guy who's going to make the tipping point and explain these things to a lot of people, a big audience, the more chances that guy is going to get interested in your game, right? It's the story that nobody else heard before that is interesting for the people who have a large audience of followers.
I think it actually starts way before any of that, because I think the two marketing decisions that you make really early is what kind of game you're going to make, and it sounds cynical, but what you're going to call it. If your game doesn't have any kind of unique proposition, if it's just like this game but with it's harder, or like that game but the elves are bigger, then nobody's going to write about it. It's not that interesting. You've already failed. Unless you can spend $20 million ramming it down people's throats, then it's not going to work. And also, if you give your game a name that's incredibly obscure, you're kind of making it hard for yourself. Maybe it's a little bit boring, but kind of an example of that. I mean, my last game on Steam was the politics game Democracy. And it does what it says on the tin. You can guess it's not a game about elves. It's democracy. So kind of like you're already halfway there. And also, there's not much competition. So I've got that politics game on Steam. If I can get promotion for that, nobody else is going to get any of my PR, because there aren't a dozen politics games on Steam. So I've already won. So before you get to the point of blogging about your game and promoting your game, you need to make a sensible marketing-based decision to some extent as to whether or not you've got a sellable game.
Yeah, I mean, from the free-to-play aspect, it's a little bit different, right? Because we have all these methodologies that we follow, but it's true, if you don't have any kind of, not even a launch strategy, but a pre-launch strategy where you're not looking at the game and creating awareness first and then thinking about the conversion after, then it's not going to be successful. Because from our standpoint, from free-to-play, we did this huge exclusive video with a large media outlet, and even though it got a lot of awareness, it really didn't result in what we were looking for, which was getting people to try the game. So then we did a different approach, which was did closed beta keys, and we started reaching out to individual media members, and we saw that was a better result for what type of game we were looking for. And so this was even before we even decided to really start marketing the game from a branding standpoint and from everything else. It was just going out and experimenting and trying different things depending on what your product is or game.
Well, so I mean, that's one of the interesting things we see a lot on Greenlight in particular, where developers don't think they should be marketers, thinking that that's a separate thing altogether, that they make the game and they throw it over the fence and there's someone else who's going to sell it. And that doesn't really work because you want it to be a cohesive thing. You want that marketing to describe and accurately portray the game. And so one of the things we were talking about last night was summing up your game in one sentence. That's just not a marketing trick. That's actually a development trick, right? So for Left 4 Dead, it was zombie apocalypse with your friends. So now, as we're making the game, if things aren't pushing on the co-op, if things aren't pushing about that, then why are they in there? What are they adding to the game? It helps us focus the game. Portal 2's Crazy Science. And so if you guys want to just go around and give a shot on what...
It depends how short you want it, but I could just say, you are the president.
There you go.
Well, Surgeon Simulator is on the name, Surgeon Simulator, but
Yeah, good name.
we had one level of depth on that, which is a heart transplant in the back of a moving ambulance hitting potholes. And once you get that image, you know what the game is all about. Right?
There's a longer description, but I'll go with it's like running around in an Escher painting in first person.
Yeah, so basically a Space Ninja game. You get to be a Space Ninja.
And so it's valuable to have that, and you often find that that gets drawn out of you the minute you do your first press interview, and they go, "So what's your game?" And you have to talk about it. But it doesn't always work for everybody. So I'm gonna ping on you because you have your you have a good story about. If you don't know who Escher is, first of all, there's some problems.
Yeah, if you don't know who Escher is, right, I do have other things that I can say to try and explain it. And I've had to explain this to like grandmothers looking for games for their children. So you do have like your one sentence, and then you have a longer one, and then you have a non-gamer one, and you have one for people who know about it. But the Escher one is interesting because like when I first went to E3 in 2010, which was my first big show, and people would be like, "What's your elevator pitch?" I could only... Well, first I tried relating it to other games, and that didn't work because if people don't know what any of those other games are, then you've completely lost them. And other times, like I'd be standing there trying to work out how to explain it, and I'd just get a lot of dead stares, which is why experimenting a lot at shows for me was really good because I could try out 50 different ways of describing my game in 3 days. And I actually went through quite a number of shows until I got the Escher thing. And I worked out why. When I'm trying to explain to people what the game is, I'm talking from the perspective of someone who knows everything about it. And I'm trying to explain what is interesting about the game to me as the person developing it. And that may be completely different to what's interesting to some random gamer that is going to be the person playing it. So I was at a random show in Australia midway through 2011, and I'd just rebranded my game. And this was at an anime festival, not even a games thing. I just went to it because it was cheap. And this person was standing there, and they're looking at my game, and they're like, "This looks like first-person Escher." And that was like the first time someone had thrown it out, and he had never even played it. And that's why I knew it was so perfect, because he didn't have to have played it. That was just what resonated with him immediately. And then when I went to the PAX 10, and I could just say to people, it's like running around in an Escher painting, all of the articles that go up are like, dear Escher, it's first-person Escher.
Awesome. So speaking of PAX and other events, I know, Henrique, not everyone can drive up into the front door in an ambulance. That was pretty good. But I think a lot of devs have this feeling of like, do I need to be the guy talking at every show? Do I need to go to every show? You get this kind of personalities. So like, do you find going to PAX, going to Eurogamer Expo, is that valuable to you, what you guys did?
Extremely valuable on so many levels. You get on hands feedback from the players, which is the best kind of focus test one can have. But like distillating the message and refining it by talking to people and listening to what they think the game is the best way, because the media, when you talk to journalists and stuff, they will want a summary, they will want a soundbite that they can replicate, like the Escher thing. And you only find that through iterations and listening to people. On shows, the kind of energy that we get from people is also help us to figure out what we're going to do next, and sometimes even ideas of how they interact with the game. We see that they're struggling with this or that level, or we see they're enjoying this or that most, and it's helpful. But if you cannot afford that, you cannot do that. That doesn't mean that you should stop. You should find a way for you to reach out to your audience and reach out to the media to build the image of your game. If you're not good at that, then find a partner, find someone to bring it to your side to do that for you. One example in the UK is the guys from Fist of Awesome. I think they recognized they couldn't do it. They hired someone to do it for them, and it was great. And it was someone just like them, an indie guy. It doesn't have to be a PR company or anything like that. But what's important is that you need to work on the message as much as you do in your game. It's not something that you have to think halfway through. Creating the image of your game is just as important as creating the game itself.
Yeah, I sort of agree, but also you're wrong. What I'd like to say is that there's kind of a bit of an echo chamber thing when it comes to conferences and trade shows, because you hear a lot, how do you promote your indie game? And a lot of people say, oh, you go to PAX and you go to GDC and you go here and you go to this other show and you meet people and you shake hands and you do this. And I'm sure that works, and it obviously does work, but you don't have to do it. And because I never did it, and I sold loads of games and did really well without ever going to a trade show ever. Went to my first GDC last year, and I've only shown at UK things, so it can be done. And I think the problem is that if you ask people, where do you hear this thing that you have to go to trade shows and everyone goes to trade shows, they tend to have heard it at a trade show. So you're only going to hear the opinions of people who have shown up. So I know some people back in the UK who are very successful developers who they don't do the trade show thing. Maybe they're really introverted or whatever, or they don't like to fly to the US, or for whatever reason, they're not here and you won't hear their opinions. But it can be done other ways. So if you're not the trade show guy, and some people aren't like the trade show guy or gal that's really outgoing and is going to go up to people and shake their hands and sort of say, hey, here's my game. You can get around that by using other methods. I mean, I use a lot of advertising instead. So yeah, I think trade shows can really work, and they're great, but you don't have to do them if you really don't like.
So I think one of the things here that's true, and if people have finished a game and then they think, oh, people say trade shows are really important, let's take our finished game to a trade show and expect that to convert into sales, then they're not understanding what the trade shows are best for, and then it's not going to be a very valuable thing for them, and they're going to say, all these people were wrong, trade shows aren't useless. Trade shows aren't useful. In the same way that if I, having never advertised before, tried to go off and advertise, I wouldn't see any return because I wouldn't know how to optimize that, and so I'd be like, oh, Cliff doesn't know what he's talking about. So I can talk about trade shows and how useful they are because that's the path that I chose to optimize down. You chose a very different path, and I think that that's part of what you need to be taking into account as well. Like for your specific game, a different marketing strategy may be more effective for you than it was for someone else, and you need to be scientific about that and working out where you fit. And if you decide that trade shows aren't something that you can attend, you don't just go, oh, I'm at a disadvantage now. You find something else to fill that gap, which for you was advertising, which for someone else that may be some really close YouTube people that they know.
Yeah, I mean, for Warframe, our perspective, we're kind of in a unique position where we're a PC title and we're also a console title. So when it comes to trade shows for us, we kind of took it in the stance where E3 was kind of the big coming out party for Warframe for a different platform that I won't talk about because we were talking about Steam today. But but for the PC side, I think for us where we've seen the biggest amount of success is kind of like what you were saying, that advertising is really where we see the most amount of results from our end, from the marketing strategy. Trade shows don't really deliver what we really need and are looking for.
Yeah, no, trade shows are not good for conversion. That's not what they're for. They're for to build a relationship with the media, know the people who are going to write about you, shake hands with them. Once you put a face to a name, it's so much easier to reach them out and get your story told. I think that the bottom line is there's no 1, 2, 3 solution for any particular game. As long as you devise a marketing plan, if you wish, a marketing evil plan, right? With the same kind of love that you do for your game design, which is unique, it is special, but if you put that kind of effort into marketing, you are halfway there, you're going to succeed. Just don't think that marketing is something detached from the game. It has to be integer to the whole journey, from the concept to delivery. It's something that you have to do all the way, and something that you have to give as much respect as the game development. It might be someone else doing it for you, but it's part of the process.
No, yeah, that's absolutely true. I was just going to add to that. When we were at PAX, we saw how people interacted with Warframe and how they were playing, and we also saw, like you said, changes that we could have done in the design and everything else like that. And yeah, there's a human interaction that you do get that you wouldn't get anywhere else unless you do trade shows.
When you were saying that it was quite technical and you need to put like the same amount of effort into marketing, I think that there is. I totally agree, and I think that there is a tendency, especially amongst programmers. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, that they kind of look down on advertising and marketing as it's kind of beneath them, or it's easy. So they'll try it a bit and it won't work, and then they'll sort of think, it's advertising doesn't work. I spent $100 on banner ads and nothing happened, and they won't put any effort into it, and they don't think it's very technical. But when you really look into advertising, I found that it's kind of completely changed over the years, and it's not like a sort of Mad Men thing where you come up with some amazing kind of. It's not that era anymore. Advertising is really technical. It's really to do with sort of data and analytics and to be honest, neuroscience. If you think advertising doesn't work, or you think that it's not scientific, there's two books. One called The Advertised Mind, and there's one called Seducing the Subconscious. And if you think that advertising doesn't work on you for games or doesn't work for you at all, it won't work. You should read those books, and I just defy you to read those two books and say advertising doesn't work and it's not scientific, because it really does. It works on all of you. Everything that you've ever bought, everything that you're wearing right now is in some way influenced by advertising, whether you like it or not and accept it. So it is a very powerful thing, and it does work, and it is very, very technical, and it's not at all beneath you if you are a programmer to really put the effort in to sort of learn about the mechanics of that.
I absolutely agree with that point. I think one of the things is that people should try more often is going out there and just picking up a phone and calling Google. They'll be happy to work with you and try to figure out how you can make the advertising work for you. And it's just not about like spending $10,000 here and big banner placement somewhere and then it didn't work, so advertising fails. No, that's not how it works at all. It's best just to go out, try with Google, ask around with other companies too, and just have conversations. Doesn't mean necessarily you have to do it, but it's worth giving a try.
So Alfonso, you're a little bit different than other people on the panel in the sense of most games you're marketing up for release, and you're kind of putting all your focus on that release date, especially when you have retail and you've got that store date you've got to hit. You kind of work from that date and you build backwards. But with free-to-play, you're continually fighting to make sure that you have player retention, that you're still growing your base. So how do you approach marketing differently in that environment?
Well, it's pretty much a long tail, right? So free-to-play, we expect games to last 5 to 7 years. So it's kind of an evolving marketing strategy as the game continues to change and move on. We have these rolling updates that come out every 6 to 8 weeks. So we try to surround our marketing around what those updates are. So that means refreshing our banner advertisements, updating our landing pages so that the conversions come in, doing like A/B testing. I know this is like really into marketing, so some guys might not be into it, but just doing things like that. And then you have other things where it's consistent media relations, doing press releases, and we're a global service, so we're looking at working with 4 or 5 different agencies in order to get it out there to as many languages as possible. So it's a lot more, I would say, it's a lot more like, just like the game is a service and your bosses, your customers, with marketing, it kind of goes the same way where it's a continuing service. And you have to almost hire internally in order to continually do it. Yeah.
No, but I mean, when you're saying you're getting too technical into that, I mean, that is a really important part about, as you're doing this marketing, go out and read. There's a wealth of stuff to go out and read about different ways to do it. We had done something for Portal 2 where when we bought banner ads on websites, depending on the website you came from, you had a different landing page because we knew that demographic coming from there, and we wanted to make sure that we captured their focus or their interest, right? And it's like, I mean, we kind of knew of that, but really we had also done a bunch of research and reading ourselves and kind of then perfected and kept working on that. And it's going to keep changing, like to your point, is the marketing is just going to keep changing, and you need to keep up with it. It's not that hard. And another good book is Nudge.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because you're like, oh, yeah, I did fall for that. I thought I was smart. So it's worth keeping informed on that kind of thing as you're looking towards it. So we've kind of touched on this, but we were joking earlier is you can't, if you see what somebody else is doing and what somebody else is successful, and if somebody here says something successful, that doesn't mean you could do it tomorrow the exact same way, right? You want to make sure that you're looking at your game uniquely, you're stepping back and saying, how do I do this? And so to that end, I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So if you want to ask us some questions on what you're working on or something we've set up here today, and also these guys will be around, we'll all be around. That's one of the cool things about game developers. We're not competitors in the true sense. We're all happy to see you succeed. We want to play your games. Unless you're making a political game, then you're Cliff's arch enemy.
No, don't. Nobody buys them. They're a failure. Don't do that.
But so if anybody has any questions, Vika will help you there.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the importance of starting marketing early in the process. Are there any dangers in starting too early in the process?
It depends on how much you have to talk about your game. If there's only so many things that you can talk about your game and you say everything interesting about it right at the beginning, then and you've still got a year and a half to be working on your game, then absolutely, like you've got nothing else that's going to hold people's interest. And this is where, for me, acknowledging that there were only so many interesting things that I knew about my game as I was developing it, until I had new things to talk about, this was one of the other benefits of just going to trade shows and letting other people preview it and then just write up their previews. Then I'm just not saying the same thing again and again and trying to get like attention for the same words. I'm letting other people preview it, have their experiences, and then a year later have them preview it again and have different experiences. And so for that, that's what I was saying, like it doesn't have to be pushing everything you have out to the press very early. It's just making people in general aware about what you're doing early enough so that you can make mistakes and find out where you need to be improving things. Or you may discover, you may think your game was interesting for these reasons, and then you'll take it to a bunch of shows and you'll be like, oh, actually, these are the things that everyone else is interested in. That's what I should be, pushing more.
Hello? Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks for the talk. I had 2 questions, if that's okay. The first question is sort of looking back on your games now, and if you could go back to when you first started them and first started marketing them, what would you kind of tell yourself then, and like sort of what would you like, I wish I had done this when I first started marketing my game? And the second question is like, what is like a reasonable percentage of your budget that you would dedicate to marketing?
Oh God, the second question's a nightmare. I really don't know. It depends. I would say at least 5% or 10% of the money that's coming in you should be spending on some sort of marketing. Even if you think it isn't working, just almost on principle, just throw it at marketing to some extent, because some of it will stick. And the thing about all this stuff is you don't know what works. There's this classic quote that half the money I spend on advertising is a complete waste, but I just don't know which half. And that is the case. So I really don't know the answer to that question. If you asked like Jeff Bezos that, he'd say 95%. Just do as much as possible in order to grow it. But in terms of the first question, it's ironic because I would have spent more money on advertising earlier. I honestly would. Democracy 3 was about, so far, I think it's about $60,000 or $70,000 in advertising and marketing. Almost all of that is like banner ads. And looking back on it, I wish I'd tripled that, to be honest, which sounds really scary, but it's always after the event you sort of think, I wish I'd spent more.
Hey, I think this is mostly a question for Chet. Over the last year or so, you guys have opened up a lot of new tools in Steamworks for marketing, giving us almost complete control over what appears on our pages, letting us feature our own games recently. I kind of want to know what's next. Like as Gabe talked about, giving us a lot more control. So as a marketing guy, I want to know what we're going to be able to do to get more exposure for our games on Steam.
So this is one of the flaws of marketing too early, and why we don't do it even to you guys. We're iterating and working on that system, and it's going to change. So if I said something today, it may not be true when we release it. And we're working on it, as Gabe said. We're going to have hopefully some announcements and some talk about it in the coming months, but there's nothing really I can say now that I can say 100% is going to happen for sure. Definitely, the reaction to opening all of that up has been great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
That lets us get more games onto Steam, which is great. And we're always just iterating and trying to move towards that. And much like you'll find with advertising, your customers will be really clear and tell you what works and doesn't. You guys, as our customers for Steam, the biz side, are really clear with us on what works and doesn't. And so that's been really successful and really exciting to see. And so we're going to keep building out on those tools.
Thank you.
My question was regarding how you guys sustain your sales after your game has been released and just kind of the strategies behind that.
It depends on the type of the game. Games as a service, that is the core of the development. We had a few games as a services like that free to play, and then when we launch, it's probably 20% of the work done. We keep it going afterwards, learning what people like, what they don't like. But even Certain was a premium game that we launched out there. We started to watch people do stuff that we never expected to be possible, like lobbing a brain and hitting a pot. The cavity, and we went back and make an achievement out of that. So we kept people talking about it. Even when we support the Oculus Rift, for instance, the public doesn't have the Oculus Rift, right? It's like 10 people and their dogs with it yet. It's a SDK. But just because we did, became a story. So in our stands, we can now have people play Surgeon with the Oculus Rift, and we have 2 hours deep queue of people to experiment the thing. So we keep it going. We added Team Fortress 2 mod to it. Then we did codename Trisha, which was the ARG to find out the new levels into the game. I said, as long as your long tail is sustainable and you want to spike it back up with sales, keep on adding content, keep on twisting your game, keep on making it more deep. And you will have the payout from that. People really, the people who are engaged with your game, they will continue to spread the word because they have more to talk about. It's all about stretching the long tail and regenerating spikes as you go. So never stop.
Sorry. One of the things that I found works really well is mod support. I've always had loads of mod support for my games, and putting Steam Workshop support in for Democracy 3 really helps, because people come along and they release new workshop content, and then I can promote that. I promote that on sort of Facebook and link to it, and then there's another sort of bump in people who inexplicably completely have never heard of the game, but then they hear about a mod for it however many months later, and that kind of keeps things going. That's worked really well.
I think with all of that is you also have to remember scale. You haven't reached everybody who can possibly buy your game. There's more people in the world than you could wrap your head around. There's more people who are going to buy your game, experience your game. And so never think like, okay, we did it, that's it. Those are the 5,000 people who are going to buy our game and we're done. There's just a bunch of people out there, and so you can keep going after it.
Right, I have a question for all of you, if possible. We did a game called Game Dev Tycoon, and I think we made everything wrong in marketing in that we didn't start at all until we were already out. And then our success was to a fluke, really, of a viral story that we couldn't control. And basing a marketing strategy on that would just be a mistake. But what I would be curious about, like Chet, you said that you wouldn't talk about what Greenlight would be because you're not that far into it yet. While I think, Cliff, you start marketing and talking about games when they're almost done, at least it feels like that. But obviously what we see on Greenlight and on Steam as well is that early access is becoming just a monster where it's getting earlier and earlier. And I was wondering if you could talk just a bit about your ideas about when do you actually start marketing and releasing.
I think for more fleshed out opinions on the early access stuff, there's a whole session on early access stuff that you should definitely go to. I mean, I'm going to have no opinion on that stuff because I didn't do it.
Yeah, there's actually a panel that I'm hosting as well in 2 hours. That'll be on early access, or an hour. They'll probably be able to talk to it clearer because they'll have a firsthand. We'll be talking about it in a more removed way. So actually, I could add that as a note to make sure that we cover that.
I'm sorry, I was asking what you think, when should you start marketing?
Day one, yeah. I think some games will probably have a different approach if it's not if you don't have much to talk about, etc. But even giving a heads up on Twitter and reaching out to some people, say, hey, I'm about to do this. Be ready. I'm going to send you some stuff later in the future. And if you can get back to me with feedback, engage people as much as you can. In our case, for Surgeon, we didn't have a chance. We came out of the game jam that finished on a Sunday. Monday morning, we put it live, and it just went nuts. We have videos being posted on YouTube with 2-3 million views overnight. So we have to react very fast, even if we didn't want to. But that's one very specific thing. Don't count on any game being like that. We certainly don't do that. Start talking of your game, start selling it to people as soon as you can. Why not? You won't be harmed by that.
I think there is a difference between talking about your game and saying what you're working on, which you can do on day one, and sort of say, you know, this is my idea for a game, and this is how I think it will work, and showing your game. Because I remember with Gratuitous Space Battles, there was an early video of it with the most unbelievably awful logo that I did that was code art, and it was like stock spaceships that I'd bought, you know, and it looks abysmal. And for a long time, if you like Googled Gratuitous Space Battles trailer, you got that. And it was horribly embarrassing. So now I will talk about working on the game early, maybe. You know, I could show you a video now of Gratuitous Space Battles 2, but I won't because I'm not happy with it, and I don't want that to be the defining image of it. But I could still blog about working on it, which is a completely different thing, and yeah, you can do that straight away.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a little different, right? Your Steam launch should be part of your marketing plan or your marketing strategy. I think that's one of the biggest things because it's such a big platform. For us, we didn't release our game on Steam until we felt the game was ready, and that was just part of the marketing strategy that came into that as well. It's really one of your biggest tools that you can have. So if your marketing strategy evolves over time, and like these guys have been saying, or Alexander's been saying, don't use it all up at once. You know, treat Steam as that kind of a marketing resource as well. Then, yeah, just try to market as early as possible. Just make sure you pace yourself.
But don't just expect it to be the marketing resource. You know, there were a bunch of people who were like, "Oh, I heard that the Steam features and sales dwarfed launch, and so those are the things that you really need." But you need to understand that you're not going to get those unless you can prove that you can sell your game, you know, yourself in the first place. Like if your game has a really successful launch and makes a bunch of money, then there's reason for Valve to want to promote that because it makes them money. Or if your game is really good at driving installs, then it will make sense for them to want to promote that because it will drive new installs. Like there's something for them at the end of the day. And it's like, you know, don't feel entitled to anything, you know, and stay paranoid about everything. There were people who went through several years and they showed up at, you know, shows, and then I've, you know, kind of thought, okay, we've been to the shows, we've done our effort, people should now care about this thing. But then it's like, if you don't stay paranoid, like, I was talking about my game over several years, and by the time I get around to the release, what I did 6 months ago is irrelevant now. Like, I need to still be talking about it I need to do more than I have ever done in the last month, on top of everything else that I had already done. So the earlier stuff was building advocates for when I get around to that last month to then do a really heavy push. I've already got all these people that want to talk about it.
One aspect of starting very early, advantage, which is not necessarily to do with marketing, but is something you should consider, is you get early feedback about your ideas. Perhaps you're going in the wrong direction. Perhaps your game has a problem. And as soon as you start talking about that, someone will come along and point that out. This is particularly useful on Greenlight and also on Kickstarter. We were joking yesterday that I wish 20 years ago I had this box where I could put my game idea in and it will pop up. It is a horrible idea, just go away and do something else. Or it would say, me, this is a great idea, right? So, and that's what Kickstarter, and that's what Greenlight, and that's what reaching out early on is for you. Not all ideas we have are good. Not all games we make will be successful. The sooner you can learn that you have a problem, sometimes you can turn it around and fix it. Sometimes you just walk away. You don't want to waste 3 years working on something that won't work. And so that marketing, reaching out, it's probably not marketing, but testing this and talking about your thing is also very useful for that. So don't rob yourself on that opportunity. Make sure that you listen to people who have to say from your game as early as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point in general with both your game and marketing of it is customers are smart. You can't fool them, and they're going to give you really clear that you're doing something right or wrong. And don't discount that. Don't think that you're so much smarter than them, or like listen to them, get the feedback. Sometimes they'll be wrong about what they're complaining about because they're describing a symptom, not the actual cause of it or whatever, but listen and be careful because they'll be very smart and they will be very vocal and they will let you know. And it's something that you can learn from. I think we have time for one more.
Hey, so I had a question for the panelists about their opinion of game demos, because in a lot of recent press, video game demos have actually gotten a whole lot of heat for being a bad marketing idea, but that completely contradicts the experience that we've had with our own game and its demo, which is currently sitting at something like a 55% conversion rate, and probably was the catalyst for us even getting any press exposure in the first place. So I'm just curious as to what everyone thinks of the idea of the game demo as a marketing tool.
First, what game was it?
It was Reciteer, for the record. Reciteer, an out-of-shop tale.
Oh, for Surgeon, it was the make or break, right? Our game jam result was our demo per se. That's where we generated all the buzz, and that was a very easy decision to make, that pull the guys out of the projects they were working on, immediately put them on Surgeon for the next 3 months and get the game released. So yeah, I absolutely believe on demos. And especially for games which a concept is very difficult to sum up, and you want people to try for free, yeah, why not? But it's not something that works for everybody. I have seen people get a little bit of backlash from demos. But
Depends on your game. I was honestly adamantly against demos for my game, and there were people who were like, no, you must have a demo, otherwise it's dishonest to customers. And I was like, my game is something that you experience once, and it is by design this kind of thing where you sit down, you completely lose track of time. And if there's something that interrupts you and says, buy the full thing, I've just lost a sale from you, so.
But in your case, they're very different games, but somewhat similar. Stanley Parable's demo for PAX was brilliant.
100% custom content.
God, was that great.
100% custom content for him, and he was able to make that very quickly.
You knew exactly what his game was based on that, but it wasn't the game. It was the oddest demo. I don't know if you've seen it. I think can you get it online, or there's videos of it?
It's available, it's free.
Yeah, check it out. It's a very interesting way to approach a demo where you don't give them your game at all.
And for a while, he was going to make a demo that was part of the game until he realized, oh, this is going to be a massive mistake because my game isn't designed like that. And so, that's where he was like, no one else is doing this, so I'm going to make this demo that's unlike anything, and that's why that drives so much exposure as well. It's like, wow, this is something we haven't seen before. If everyone made demos that didn't show off the game, then you'd have people who start thinking that their demos are just very dishonest for not showing them what the actual game was.
My experience is kind of weird because I used to be one of these people, it was even on my website saying there's always a demo. It's very important to me that, all my games have demos. I never buy a game without a demo, and now I don't do demos. So I'm a bit of a hypocrite to some extent. But I did find with Gratuitous Space Battles there was a demo, and that was fine. But when it really took off and it was selling really well, when I looked at the stats on Steam, people just bought it. I mean, there was a demo, but people didn't try it. It was like a tiny percentage of people would actually sort of try the demo and then buy the game. It seemed completely irrelevant. So I didn't even do one for Red Shirt or for Democracy 3. It didn't seem necessary. And very few people have said, "Where's the demo?" It really does depend on your game, but it looks to me like, for better or worse, the demo is kind of unnecessary.
If you don't have a demo, then you need to prove in many other ways why people should buy your game. People are going to buy your games because they've seen a bunch of the things that you've been able to produce, and you're good at advertising, and you catch their attention in other ways. If this is the first thing and you haven't done marketing, then a demo may be the first time someone experiences your game, and that's why they buy it.
Well, also, luckily, there aren't like 4 or 5 other run-the-country simulation games that do have demos. So, there's no competition. If you really want, a game where you're the president or whatever, then here's my game. I'm not having to compete in a little space, which makes it easier to, I guess, sort of get away with not having a demo. But also, it's a really complicated game that takes ages to play. And to some extent, I'm not sure demo works for it. But, your mileage may vary.
So I think that's a good point to end it. And on that point, though, it is whatever we've told you today You have to take the essence of the idea, not what we've told you, because it's got to be new, it's got to be fresh, it's going to be unique for your game. Every game gets marketed different. Every time you do it, it's got to be new and different, and that's what's going to work the best. So, to that, thank you. Good job.